cause personal? Yes, and here are 5 reasons to think so. 1, there are only...
Now here's where it's going to get hairy, because he's going to start tacking on these things that ultimately rely on revelation, right? But remember, in the Thomistic scheme, they don't believe in appealing to revelation when they're in the domain of autonomous natural reasoning, right? Fides et ratio. What does it say? Natural reason is autonomous and does not have anything to do with revelation.
2 kinds of entities that exist: concrete ones like 2 toy blocks, and abstract ones like the number 2 or the shape of a cube. But unlike concrete objects, abstract objects like numbers and shapes have no causal power. Therefore, the cause of the universe cannot be an abstract object like a number, but must be some kind of concrete object. But we also know this cause must be an immaterial concrete object, and the only immaterial causal reality we know of is some kind of mind, which means the cause must be personal in nature. 2, there are only 2 kinds of explanations for physical phenomena: scientific ones and personal ones. Scientific explanations consist of physical laws that describe matter-energy interactions. For example, the scientific answer to the question, "Why is that pot boiling?" is that heat is agitating the water molecules and causing evaporation. The personal explanation would involve an intention of an agent, like the pot.
This is a little better. I would agree with the line of argumentation that he's making here. I agree with. However, remember that this is just simply not consistent with the actus purus that he's laid out. You can't have Aristotle version of actus purus where you define God's essence as pure act with no potentia and then say, but this actus purus is also personal, right? Because Aristotle's AP doesn't work with this God. That's the point here. And a lot of people are confused because they'll say, well, then why would John Damascus say God is pure act? Why would you use the phrase that God is the one? Why would you say that God is a first cause? Because it just depends on how you mean those things. That's it, right? It's not the words themselves that are the problem. It's the sense that is the problem. And this is what so many people do when they get tripped up on language, word concept fallacy.
Pot is boiling because I wanted tea. A universe beginning from nothing can't have a scientific explanation because a state of nothingness lacks the matter, energy, and descriptive laws that make up those explanations. Therefore, only a personal explanation of the universe remains. 3, this cause of the universe explains the existence of not just material objects, but also abstract objects like numbers, mathematical truths, and propositions. But these entities only...
This is getting a little better. This is like the Phaser chapter on abstract objects, and he's kind of getting in the direction of divine conceptualism, which I agree with that, right? We make the divine... We have a form of divine conceptualism in the Logi doctrine. However, remember that for Roman Catholics, this is not going to work out too well because they pretty much across the board locate and identify and smush the divine ideas into the divine essence. They literally say the divine essence is identical to the divine ideas. Now, remember, if God is pure act, no potentia, his essence is pure act, no potentia, and if that essence is eternal, then all of those divine ideas, which are somehow distinct, I don't know how they're supposed to be distinct if there's no real distinctions in the divine essence. That would mean that the many things of creation are not really distinct. I mean, how could distinct beings be based on an essence that has literally no distinctions? Okay, that doesn't work. But setting that aside, the created order, right, which is patterned on the divine ideas, it has to come to be. Because if the divine ideas are eternal and they're the patterns of creation, then creation must come to be. Or else it's meaningless. It makes no sense. Or you have to then say God has many ideas that he did not actualize. So he only actualized some of these. And that's the basis of the created order. Uh-oh, now we've admitted potentia in God again.
Only exist in the mind. And so if these objects have necessary existence, then they must reside in a necessarily existing mind that is explanatorily prior to them. Moreover,
this is good. I do agree with the divine conceptualist argument. However, it ought to be tweaked. It has to be tweaked to St. Maximus's doctrine of the Logi, or else it's not going to work. If you put the divine ideas in the divine essence, as Augustine and Aquinas in the West do, almost across the board, the argument is not going to work, right? It's gonna be a version of Platonism. And that's why we don't affirm Platonism and we don't say the divine ideas are the divine essence.
If this mind has no potentiality, then its knowledge of these truths could not be limited. And so it must...
Did you hear that? The divine mind has no potentiality. Oh, he just messed up there, big time. So now he's back to being consistent with the Actus Purus doctrine. The mind of God has no potentiality. But wait a minute, I thought that creation was a freely willed thing. I thought that God doesn't actualize every possible world. Exactly. You want to hear that again? Let's hear that again. Make sure he says it.
A number, but must be some kind of concrete object. But we also know this cause must be an immaterial concrete object. And the only immaterial causal reality we know of is some kind of mind, which means the cause must be personal in nature. 2, there are only 2 kinds of explanations for physical phenomena, scientific ones and personal ones. Scientific explanations consist of physical laws that describe matter-energy interactions. For example, the scientific answer to the question, why is that pot boiling, is that heat is agitating the water molecules and causing evaporation. The personal explanation would involve an intention of an agent, like the pot is boiling because I wanted tea. A universe beginning from nothing can't have a scientific explanation because a state of nothingness lacks the matter, energy, and descriptive laws that make up those explanations. Therefore, only a personal explanation of the universe remains. 3, this cause of the universe explains the existence of not just material objects, but also abstract objects like numbers, mathematical truths, and propositions. But these entities only exist in the mind, and so if these objects have necessary existence, then they must reside in a necessarily existing mind, that is explanatorily prior to them. Moreover, if this mind has no potentiality, then its knowledge of these truths could not be limited, and so it must...
So now he's admitted necessary creation. Now he's admitted eternal creation. Now he's not literally saying he believes in eternal creation, but what he just said leads to that. That's another reason why this argument just doesn't work. The God that he's ending up to presenting here is an unknowable, irrelevant, unmoving, unchanging Hellenic force, not the second person of the Godhead who steps into time and space, becomes incarnate. So I'm not saying that Trent Horn denies the incarnation. I'm saying that when the Roman Catholics do their philosophizing and their apologetic, they act like you can do it apart from and with no reference to the incarnation. That's the problem here.
Must be all-knowing. 4, many atheists say they believe in God if they saw something like an amputated limb healed through prayer. But this means that they would pick a divine explanation for an event over simply saying the event has no cause whatsoever. But if our universe came into being just as inexplicably as a healed amputated limb, then atheists should be consistent and conclude that the universe has a divine cause as well. 5, our universe contains moral properties that only make sense if they have a transcendent moral source. Now, morality only applies to persons. So if the cause of the universe is the source of these moral properties, then it must be a supremely good person and not an amoral, impersonal force. Which brings us to my last question. Number 9, is the cause of the universe good? By good,
I'm not sure that follows. I mean, we've got all of these assumptions that have not been justified. We got all these arguments being made that kind of appeal to like common sense, common morality. I mean, why, even if we admit a first cause, why must it be a moral first cause? I don't understand how he made that leap on that point.
In both the moral and non-moral sense of that word. A car has a bad timing belt, not because the belt is disobedient, but because it can't fulfill its purpose of synchronizing an engine's valves. It's bad because it lacks something it needs in order to act in accord with its nature. And this is true not just for artificial objects, but also for natural ones like trees and animals. Now, if the cause of the universe has no potential and is pure actuality, then it must be good by definition. That's because it wouldn't lack.
Well, this is a problem because now we have grades of being, assumptions of levels of being, chain of being, that if you are actus purus, that's better. That's a higher, better reality than the lower composite reality. Really? Where has this been shown? Where was this argument made? No, it's just sort of like a train just sort of going through the china shop with like not even questioning any of these arguments, right? It's like nobody's. I don't know where Cosmic Skeptic's going to go with this, but it just makes me want to get the Phaser book back out because Phaser did the same stuff, right? It's like, let me throw out 9 things that the ancient and medieval world said, and let's see if you can respond, Mr. Atheist. Well, again, I'm going to critique the peripatetic axiom, right? I'm going to ask you, well, you're bringing in stuff like personalism, but I don't have an a priori sense of what personal or personalism is. I mean, yes, I can use analogies between how there's a human person who is distinct from common human nature, right? We're instantiations in particular instances of human nature, and then we are distinct persons, right? But that doesn't tell me really how I'm supposed to therefore leap to God is an analogy to a human person or mind. I believe that as a Christian, but I believe it because of divine revelation. Trent wants me to just kind of like make these leaps, like, oh yeah, I guess there's order in the world. It must come from a super mind, right? I just don't think that argument works very well unless you're using a transcendental argument. That's an even stronger way to make that argument. Because then you've got a whole paradigm that you're presenting and arguing for, which includes an explanation for personalism, for persons, for nature, for existence, for being, right? These debated philosophical categories, for metaphysics, for teleology, for ethics. You've got all of those things in the paradigm of Christianity. But remember, Trent's not arguing for a paradigm. He's just acting like all this stuff is just, well, we all know this. It's just commonly general, right? Or whatever phrase Phaser uses.
Lack anything. And so it cannot be bad in the non-moral sense of that word. But the cause is also morally good because it is the source of objective morality, or what I call moral facts. Alex said in his debate with Frank Turek that if objective morality...
I'm sorry, I know I keep pausing, but I have to critique this here because why do we think that the causal chain in the natural world tells us that the original uncaused actualizer is somehow moral or good? I mean, for example, if I'm looking at the natural world as it is now after the fall, reasoning back to the cause of the natural world as it is, it looks to me like the creator of this world is blind, bumbling, wants there to be death everywhere. He wants that parasitical, cyclical nature of life and death feeding on one another. Remember, this is from people who believe in theistic evolution too, by the way. So millions of years of death produces Adam and Eve. Now, if that's what I do to learn about the beginning of the world from natural theology, I'm saying, right? Natural theology, remember, we don't appeal to revelation. We look at the natural world, we look at causation, we look at teleology, we look at causal chains, blah, 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 blah. And then supposedly we derive these like generic principles for the generic theism from all this. But how do I interpret the natural world when the natural world is full of death? And the Bible says death is the enemy. Natural and spiritual death is the enemy. Because all death is just death from the same angel of death, Satan. Right? He's the one who brought death into the created order. Romans 8 is very, very clear that the cosmic scope of of Adam's sin, right, is not just spiritual, it's also physical. Right? All of the corruption and decay, even down to the animal world, the vegetative world, right? All that decay and corruption that came as a result of Adam's sin is not just physical or spirit, it's both. Death is the last enemy to be destroyed in the resurrection. Does Paul believe that there's only a spiritual resurrection? No, that's Gnostic. There's a physical resurrection. And so the physical death also is a result of Adam's sin. Just like Christ's reversal of Adam's sin is a physical resurrection as well as spiritual. Baptism being the spiritual, the bodily resurrection being the physical. Paul says we have a down payment now, the Holy Spirit, baptism, that is the beginning and the down payment for the bodily resurrection in the future, which he calls the adoption. And he says that adoption of the sons of God is the resurrection of the whole cosmos in Romans 8. So how could you understand the cosmos apart from Christ when the cosmos' whole purpose, telos, is Christ? This is ludicrous. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to erect philosophy systems to convince people when literally the whole argument that Paul in the New Testament and St. Maximus makes is that when you look out at the natural world, that's teaching you Jesus. And it doesn't matter whether unbelievers find that hard to swallow, right? Oh, we can't say that. We can't tell them that. Oh, they'll never buy that. We got to water it down and talk about syllogisms all day and blah, 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 blah. The point is not that syllogisms are bad. The point is that in Romans 1, Paul explains man's problem is not a lack of syllogisms. It's not a lack of evidences. It's not that he doesn't look long enough at the natural world to understand, this or that. It's that man is a sinner. That's man's problem. Autonomous epistemology is man's problem. And that's what the classical foundationalists and classical theists don't understand.